How's it going, everyone? Sorry for my response drop. That was the day. It's July 24th, 2021, and today we're going to talk about Invest 90L, which does have a pretty good chance of developing into a tropical depression or tropical storm Fred. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather content. So take a look at Invest 90L right now, just off the coast of Florida. You see that it isn't really, I'd say, very organized. Sure, there is a lot of convection on the southern side of the storm. However, you see that the northern side of the storm is completely sheared out and just swallowed up by very dry and stable air. So as a result, it's currently inhibiting development of this storm, and it's going to be really difficult for this storm to develop with dry air on the northwestern side of this storm. But we still do see a lot of convection on the southern side of the storm, and if that convection could somehow wrap around the center of circulation, we could see tropical storm Fred on our hands, and there is a pretty good possibility that eventually the wind shear will weaken down and the dry air will weaken down to the point where we could maybe see tropical storm Fred. However, there's still a lot of uncertainty because right now exactly where that wind shear will be located still has yet to be seen, and how much dry air will really entrain the center of circulation. And what's also inhibiting this storm from developing is the pretty much the distance between the mid-level low and the lower level low, which are pretty much in a certain distance away from each other. And since they're so far apart from each other, it's really hard for all that cyclonic vorticity or energy to focus in on one area to enhance or increase the max wind speed. So as a result, we aren't really seeing this develop into a tropical depression or tropical storm yet because of the dry air, some of the wind shear on the southern side, and there's currently a disconnect between where the mid-level low is and the lower level low is at this point. Now, taking a look at the current chance of development from the National Hurricane Center, you see that there's currently a 60% chance of tropical cyclone formation within the next 48 hours, and then within the next 5 days, it's still a medium 60% chance. So more likely than not, the National Hurricane Center wants to develop this into potentially a tropical depression or tropical storm, where we're pretty much at a 60% chance at this point. And you see that the area it could develop over the next 5 days is a very small area. It isn't really going far out from where the storm is right now, as currently there's very weak steering flows on this storm right now, and currently there's a trough that's moving through the northeast that's trying to steer it out to sea. However, there's also a pretty big ridge just toward not only toward Bermuda, but another ridge that's towards closer to the United States, that's trying to steer it further westward. So as a result of a disconnect between two steering flows, it's going to move very slowly and meander just off the coast of Florida over the next several days. And that could be concerning because, for one thing, is that with slow moving storms, and meandering storms, typically the uncertainty becomes higher because it's harder for the computer model to detect which steering flow will win out, because the steering flows are so equal with each other pretty much that it's hard to really tell where exactly the storm will go. And also, since it's slow moving, there's a more likely chance it could maybe meander along the coast of Florida and bring heavy rainfall throughout Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, and that could create problems in the future for those areas. Now, taking a look at the current wind shear, you see that Invest 90L is currently just in an area where it's right in between strong wind shear. Currently, I'd say it's under moderately strong wind shear. It isn't major wind shear to completely tear the storm apart. However, it isn't necessarily light either, as it's right in the middle, and it's right in that small space where the wind shear is just weak enough to where it still has a chance of formation. Because if this was any further south or any further north, then it'll be unlikely that this will develop, and it'll be more likely that this storm just drifts out into the open Atlantic and doesn't do anything. However, it's currently under an area where the wind shear is fairly light at this point. So as a result, it does have a chance to develop because of that. Now, taking a look at the relative humidity in the mid levels of the atmosphere between the atmospheric layers, where the air pressure is 400 millibars to 700 millibars, you see that on the northern side of this storm, there's a lot of dry air. However, if we continue to move forward, the GFS doesn't really doesn't really see much of a future with this storm, as it still expects a lot of dry air to entrain the northwestern portion of the storm, and that might hinder the storm all throughout for the most part. However, if the wind shear, like I said, is lighter than expected, then we could see maybe moisture wrap more around the center of circulation and maybe develop into a tropical storm or a tropical depression, as currently that's what the National Hurricane Center is favoring slightly more, that we're going to see some sort of tropical depression. However, the uncertainty still remains, because there's still, according to the National Hurricane Center as of right now, there's still a 40% chance that this doesn't develop into anything at all. So we just need to pay close attention to this. However, I'd say the peak potential of this storm isn't very high. If this does develop into a tropical storm, it's likely going to be a weak tropical storm at best. I see the max potential maybe being 50 miles per hour to maybe 55 or 60 at the very max, but I don't expect this to come close to hurricane status, as at worst, I expect like a mid-level tropical storm, but more likely a low-end tropical storm. However, that still doesn't spare Florida from the impacts at all, as I want you guys to keep that in mind, that we've seen weak tropical storms and tropical depressions all throughout the United States, bring just billions of dollars in damages just off of flooding alone. I'm not saying this storm will be anything like those storms, like Tropical Storm Harvey, but it's still at least something to be aware of if you're right around Florida and the Southeast. Now, take a look at the upper level wind forecast provided from the GFS model. You see that the storm is currently going to be in a relatively in a good area where the wind shear won't be very strong, and you see if we move forward, we might see the upper level high move further southward and bring more wind shear along this storm. However, that still has yet to be seen how strong the wind shear will be, as the wind shear, even if in this case it isn't very strong, so there's still that possibility that we don't see much wind shear at all for this storm to develop. So that's certainly something to keep in mind, that the wind shear will be relatively light with this storm. However, the problem will be with the storm, like I said, will be mainly the dry air. If it could somehow fend off the dry air, then this will certainly have a good much higher chance of developing. However, if it can't fend off this wind shear, then it might be very difficult for this to form. So now let's take a look at the European model, see what it's saying, and you see that the European model isn't really developing a very strong low pressure system either. However, again, there's still that possibility it could develop into a weak tropical storm, and I do expect that that's the more likely scenario at this point. Now, taking a look at the current ensemble members provided from the European model and the GFS model, you see that there's a very strong disconnect, because we see a decent amount of ensemble members on the European model take this well out to sea into the open Atlantic. However, a good amount of those still take this storm making landfall in Florida, while for the GFS model, it's pretty much taking all the ensemble members making landfall in Florida. So at this point, it seems like the track towards Florida is a more likely scenario. However, again, with slower moving storms like this, we can't rule out the possibility that maybe this moves northward. But again, I do think that chance is now diminishing at this point, as it seems more likely a slow pressure system will make landfall somewhere around Florida, I'd say. Now, moving on into the rainfall you could expect in Florida from this storm, you see that heavy rainfall could be possible throughout southern Florida, where you could receive up to 3 inches of rain in some locations. Even if this doesn't develop into a tropical storm threat, there's still there's still a pretty good chance of heavy rain through some Florida. So you guys need to stay pay close attention to that, and there could be a flash flood risk as well. Now, taking a look at the Futurecast radar to see when you should expect the rain in Florida and where exactly the thunderstorm activity will lie at. So taking a look at that, you see that as of right now, thunderstorm activity is mainly off the coast of Florida, but that will change eventually as we're going to see more thunderstorm activity move along the coast of Florida, and we could see more rain out of it as the low pressure system moves closer to Florida, as we're going to see a stronger steering flow from this big ridge in the United States steer this further westward. So that's certainly something to keep in mind. Now, in terms of the track, with it I'm doing with this storm, I'm expecting this to move west, like a lot of what the computer models are saying at this point, not ruling out the potential that maybe it moves northward, but I think that chance is now diminishing based off of the recent computer model guidance. But you see that Tropical Storm Fred is more likely to form than not based off of what the National Hurricane Center is saying. But even if this does develop, make sure in Florida you stay prepared for heavy rain and flooding and potentially rip currents just off the coast of Florida. So keep a close eye on that if you're along Florida. But yeah, guys, I guess that's it for this video. And thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather content. And I hope you guys have a good day.